Welcome back to Unveiling Democracy. I'm Syanne Centeno-Bloom, and I'm here with civil rights lawyer, my co-host, Ashley Jacobson. And today we are going to talk about the new Trump charges that have come out. But first, we want to talk about Disability Pride Month, which was in July. And I want to share a little bit about some of my experience as a disabled person who is a model and for Playboy. So why don't you get us started and you can talk about Disability Pride Month?
Sure. So Disability Pride Month is celebrated, like you said, in the month of July. I'm also a proud disabled woman. I live with lupus, endometriosis, other chronic illnesses that have affected things like my mobility, my ability to eat, a lot of different areas of my life. And I am also a civil rights lawyer that focuses on serving the disability community. So disability is a huge part of my life, as I know it is yours as an activist and advocate. But I would say, this year for Disability Pride Month, my health has not been great. And so I've been in a lupus flare for many months. And I have amazing doctors who are on the right track, but it just takes time to get your body to respond to new treatments and such. So I had to really prioritize any extra ounce of energy I had to work and to this podcast that I'm so excited about. But I wasn't able to post quite as much as I normally would during Disability Pride Month this year. So I'm glad we get to talk about it. One thing that I am really looking forward to is many months ago, myself and another disabled attorney and another individual with a disability filed a lawsuit to gain accessibility to public buildings in the state of Michigan and access to restrooms for disabled people. There are a lot of state and county and federal buildings that are not ADA compliant in our mind. And so, when looking at the law, we're really fighting to make sure that we don't have a 10 to 15 minute trek to get to the one accessible restroom stall in the basement of a skyscraper when I have to go to court. So that case is ongoing. And I think that there will probably be an opportunity for us to go into more detail about that.
Yeah, because I want to hear more about that. Because I think that's a nationwide issue that your case could be like the case that starts maybe more cases across the country.
Yes, I would love that. And I've been incredibly lucky that there are wonderful attorneys, some who have disabled loved ones, some who have disabilities themselves, but they're not joined as plaintiffs, who have been volunteering their time on the case. And I am so grateful for all of them. And I'd love to talk about it more. Hopefully we can see if maybe I can get one of my co-plaintiffs to join us and one or two of our attorneys, because it's a weird position for me to be in. I'm used to representing people as an attorney and not being the client. So it's been kind of a strange experience, but yeah, so we'll see, and I'll keep you posted on that. But the one thing that I did want to kind of hype up for Disability Pride Month too is there are wonderful disabled creators like yourself and authors. So the one thing I did want to do, she did not ask me to do this, but one of the content creators who I love, her name is Jay. She is really well known in the endometriosis community. She also has lupus, and we've been kind of going through our journey with lupus together. She wrote a book called Part of You, Not All of You. And it's a guided journal, which has affirmations and things like that. And so
I love that.
Yes, I highly, highly recommend it. And
wait. I got to get a pen. I got to write this down. Actually, no. Yeah. Just send it to me later, because this sounds like it would benefit anybody with chronic illness.
Absolutely. And the guided journal sections are what are some of the ways you need to pivot in your, goals, or your medical care to kind of like help you adapt to living with, I think, really any type of disability, but she's speaking from the perspective of chronic illness. And her Instagram is at Life Above Illness on Instagram, and she's wonderful. So just wanted to take a moment there. And then another author who I love so much is Kia Brown. I'm sure you know her. She just had one of her other books come out, The Secret Summer Promise. So check that out. It's like a kind of like a young adult fiction book.
Yes.
It's so good. And then her other book is like one of my favorites of all time. It's called The Pretty One. And it's really good. It's on life, pop culture, disability, and other reasons to fall in love with me. And I love that.
Oh, I love that. Wait, what was the one that she just came out with that you said?
The Secret Summer Promise.
What is that about? Because that cover is gorgeous.
It really is. So it's very like young adult, but like for today's audience. So it's very inclusive of certain aspects of disability without making disability like the central focus, which is like, I love, because like so often books that pertain to disability are just like disability, disability, disability. But this is like, it's part of the story, but it's not the whole story.
Right.
But in this one, she's like a young person recovering from illness and like surgery. And she is kind of like wanting to, like kind of put herself back out there and get like reinvigorated and kind of exploring feelings about her best friend. And it's really, really good.
You read it. It sounds like you read it.
Yeah, I don't want to give away too much, but it's really good. I
want to read it.
And then last but not least, I've talked about this book before, but Lolo Spencer, who is on HBO's Sex Lives of College Girls, she just came out with a book. And it's called Access Your Drive and Enjoy the Ride. And I have read this twice. It's very good.
What? Okay, no, I've been wanting to check it out. I definitely need to check that last one out. I forgot that she came out with the book. I feel like sometimes you mindlessly scroll through Instagram. And I was like, wait, I saw that cover and I was like, okay, now I just remembered that she had a book that came out. But no, I'm going to buy it literally after this.
It's so good. It's so good. And it's like, I think a perfect like beach read by the pool. Like it's a quick read, but there's so much substance there and highly recommend. I left like a little Amazon review and I don't normally do that, but
you know what would be cool? You should do a little like book recommendation list or something and
I would
on
love
social
that.
media. And then we can do that. We can highlight it here, especially books by marginalized people. So I love that you brought that up because I think that would be a great addition to the show.
Yeah, well, thanks. And I would love to do that. I'm a big reader and, there are a lot of like audiobooks available now, versions of those. On Being Human by Judy Human is one of the best kind of like comprehensive views of her experience on being a disability advocate as well. And I listened to that audiobook and it's really good. But yeah, I just wanted to like for Disability Pride Month, we talk obviously on the podcast about a lot of frustrating things in politics and the world of advocacy, but I wanted to just take a moment to hype them up as well as hype you up because your content is incredible. So,
thank you.
With that, my little Playboy bunny, what has your experience been like as a disabled Playboy bunny?
It's been good and bad. I feel like there's so many layers to it because the good part of it is I found a self-love that I never knew before. Like I didn't know that I could love myself deeper than I've had already loved. It's very much like I love my husband and I love him more every day. Like that's how it made me feel because taking pictures of yourself nude is a very vulnerable state to be in.
Yes.
And yeah, and it was really scary, but I've always gone towards things that are scary in
Yes.
the entirety of my life. And so me knowing that I was so afraid of it made me want to do it more,
I love that.
And creating art with my body just made me appreciate my body more because, as you know, as chronically ill and disabled women, we have complicated relationships with our bodies.
Oh, yeah.
When we flare up, there's times where we get angry with our bodies and we curse at our bodies. And then there's times where we accept it. I think that's the complexity of being disabled and being a woman.
Right.
But creating art with my body made me appreciate everything that I feel for my body, positive and negative. But it made me see my body in a positive light because I was making art with it. So it's like forcing me to see the beauty in what is not the beauty standard. Scars, cellulite, stretch marks, the wheelchair, all of that. And I'm not super thin either. So that's been like the positive parts of being a Playboy bunny. And of course the community. I found a great community of women and men who support each other and don't judge each other. And for me, it's not the way that I pictured these, this type of work, to have employees that are so loving. I don't know why I didn't expect that, my own prejudices perhaps, but once I got in this world, like everybody is so smart and loving and supportive and they're like activists, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
wow, you're people, like
Yes. Well, and it's like the history of like that type of work has been so stigmatized in our generation. Like we kind of grew up with it being like a magazine that was blacked out. So like, like our
yeah.
friends would have like, oh, we found my dad's Playboy, not my dad, but like, like people would be
Yes.
like, I found my dad or my brother's Playboy. And like, that was what we knew of it. It was very like hush hush and hidden. And then obviously that reality show came out about like
Yes, the three bunnies, the girls next door. That
Girls
was my
Next Door.
show.
I watched it too. And I was like, oh wow. And then as I've gotten older, I've listened to like podcasts that have interviewed different like models.
Mhm.
And you do realize like there is such like a human element to it. And I give you so much credit because it is incredibly vulnerable what you did and really powerful. And as a disabled woman, I can totally relate to having a complicated relationship with your body. Um, and so it's great that you found so much support because I mean, let's be real, like you're gorgeous, but
Oh, thank
I think
you.
that like you just, when you put yourself out there, you never know if you're going to get like a positive reaction or judgment.
And I've gotten all of those. And that brings me to the not so good side of being a, official Playboy bunny. I don't know if you've seen the docu-series on Hulu called Secrets of Playboy.
Yes, I did watch it.
I started watching it a couple weeks ago, and it made me want to go back and rewatch The Girls Next Door. So I started watching it,
Mm.
and I was like, I think 13 or 14 when that show came out. And I see problem all in the episodes. And so, I mean, there's a dark side to this industry. And Playboy has come out and said that they want to be more inclusive when they came back
Right.
out to revamp Playboy. So that's why I decided to go into it, because of that message of inclusivity and that sexual freedom is for everybody. Well, I think that's the marketing ploy that they want to put out there because they know that it is financially beneficial. But I'm completely hidden from the rest of the bunnies on the site.
What?
And yeah, so people, when they try to find me, they can't find me. They have to go specifically to my link, but the other bunnies that I know are searchable. The only ones that I know that aren't searchable are trans and or disabled, or a
Wow.
guy. There's also a guy who's a bunny, and he doesn't fit the beauty standard. He doesn't show up either when you search his name. So it's like, why is it that all these people that are not the beauty standard or who are multi-marginalized, because all of them are in some way multi-marginalized. Right. And so that's kind of weird because we're like allowed in the club, but we are not allowed to be seen. It gives me very much Greatest Showman vibes. Like,
yes.
Like, we want to use you to make money, but like, I don't want to be associated with you in reality. Like, you know what I'm saying?
That is not okay. Because truthfully, I mean, that's like classic performative, you know, like you said, we're going to allow you in because it benefits us to portray our brand as being inclusive without actually taking the steps to make it inclusive and accessible.
Yeah, exactly. And so not only are we hidden, but on their social media pages and all that, they're still perpetuating the same beauty standard from the early 2000s, right? Of the bleach blonde hair and white, mostly white. There is a little bit of diversity, but I mean, we're talking about one person of color per, I don't know, 15 or 20, white girls, and everybody fits the standard that are shown. And so that's really upsetting because they say that, but they're not sticking with what they promise. It was just performative, as you said. And so I kind of made a lot of noise about it online. Because that's what I do. Yeah, that's what I do, because somebody has to hold these companies accountable, because I don't want to be used as, I don't know, a product to sell the idea of diversity, but not actually treat me like a human being or like I'm worthy of being there. So I made a lot of noise about it, and someone who works for Playboy reached out to me, and I connected them with my publicist. And I said, I said, this is a conversation I want to have about diversity, about disability inclusion, about, all the marginalized identities, trans, etc. We need to talk about this. And well, they said they were going to get back to me, but they never did. It's been 2 weeks, I think, since I sent that, maybe.
Playboy, come on.
And, there's a lot of although there is a lot of love and support from the other bunnies, there is a very small subset of bunnies, just like in any type of industry, who make excuses for Playboy, but they're also favored by Playboy. So
of course.
And there was an argument that ensued between the bunnies in a group that I was in. And I was defending the girls from a situation that happened. And I'm not going to speak to that situation because I was not there, but it happened at an event. But I was defending the girls because I said, we can't say that their experience isn't valid when there was, tons of girls saying the same thing. And those who were speaking up were multi-marginalized in some way, or, Black or Latina or another person of color. I saw this division, very, very clear division. I saw these white girls on one side, and then I saw these brown girls on one side, beauty standard on one side, people who struggle with the beauty standard on the other side. And it became a big fight. And I was just defending the ones who are more likely to be oppressed, of course.
Sure.
Just saying, like, don't, because the other girls were invalidating them. They were saying things that were passive aggressive and just plain mean. So I was like, listen, we don't have to name call or do any of that. I was like, you can disagree without being condescending,
right,
or patronizing. But one of the girls, she came out of nowhere and basically started telling me that men wouldn't be interested in me because I'm disabled and I'm not the beauty standard, and Playboy has a specific preference. And I said, well, isn't that the problem? Because they're saying that they don't want to be that anymore. And she became very nasty towards me, and it was really weird that she said that. And then other girls chimed in and were just like, what the F, or like,
that is wild. I am so sorry that happened to you. Like, that is 100% not okay. And to whoever, because we all hear those arguments, right? I mean, I in my line of work, I have to hear from like employers and other employees, like, why should they get special treatment? Which of course, accommodations are not special treatment. It's just removing unnecessary barriers in the workplace. But I hear those things a lot. Like, well, why should we listen to, quote, this small subset of people when, quote, the majority of people are like this or want this? And to that, like, I know I don't need to tell you this, but like, Playboy is making this change towards being more inclusive, at least on, its public facing campaigns, because it makes business sense to do that. People want to see people who are not this like old school, outdated minority of what beauty can be. And by minority, I mean like a small group of the population looks like the traditional, what we knew 20 years ago of Playboy bunnies. People don't want that anymore because people are attracted to people of all different races, abilities. Like, it's a good business decision for them. They're not doing you a favor by saying you are a talented model, and so we want you to represent our brand. You are doing them a favor.
Yes, exactly.
Any Playboy bunny or anyone else who can't see that just isn't well versed on the business end of things. But regardless, that is like, I'm like fired up about this because
no, I am too.
You should not have had to go through that.
No, and I never got an apology or anything. And honestly, like, I don't feel like I'm going to continue with them. The only reason that I have is because our community has told me how much it means to them. And like I told that girl, I said, the men who follow me on Playboy, who subscribe to me, I said, they're disabled, because she said there's no money to make there. And I was like, I'm actively making money there.
Right.
And because of the way that because I use a wheelchair, like, come on now.
Everybody sits. Everybody sits.
I know. And so it's just wild to me that she said that. And I was like, well, first of all, disabled men have told me that they are so happy to have somebody that is like them, because they didn't feel represented in that industry, and it can make them feel not as connected to, the people they're looking at. And it makes a difference. Totally. And it's not just men that follow me. It's women who need to feel better about themselves. Or it is not even just disabled men and women. It's men that are not disabled, or women that aren't disabled.
Right. Like, I'm sorry, but like I'm disabled. My husband is not. He's still he's attracted to me. And I mean, it's just like ridiculous that people wouldn't see that, like, again, disabled people are human beings and are, multifaceted, and like I said, talented, and I would hope that in the future, Playboy offers and extends some type of apology to you, but also really makes a concerted effort to like root out that old school way of thinking about what beauty is and not engage with that narrative in the future, not just because it makes them look bad, but because it is bad.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I'm not even going to lie to you. I went to her profile to see who she was. And then I think I figured out why she had such an issue with me. And I think it's my political beliefs and what I stand for, because she was the complete opposite of what I am.
There's always something deeper to it, right?
Exactly. Yes, there is. So that brings me to our next topic, the Trump charges that just came out. The girl that I will say was bullying me, who was a Playboy bunny, was a Trump supporter, which was very upsetting to me
Yeah.
to see that that's why she was probably treating me that way. But big news came out yesterday.
Yes.
That, and I have my little notes here, Trump has been indicted a third time. And the charges that he is facing, I'm reading here 4. I don't know if that's broken up, but I'll just read them from 1, which was conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. Is that correct?
Yes.
And for conspiracy to defraud the US, what they are referring to is Trump being dishonest and deceitful intentionally to obstruct and defeat the lawful federal government's responsibility for collecting, counting, and certifying the presidential election results. So that's the first one. And that's probably referring to what was going on in Georgia, Arizona,
Michigan.
Am I right? Michigan. Yeah. And then the second charge, which was conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, that refers to the January 6th, 2021 congressional proceeding to certify the election results. So that was a big one. And the third one, I had a little bit of trouble understanding the third one. I was hoping you could help me with that. What does it mean? Obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding. Do you know what that means?
Yeah. So essentially, kind of along those same lines, it's whereas some of the charges pertain to fraud. So he attempted to defraud, where those charges you're looking at, what was kind of his state of mind? Did he know that what he was conveying to the public was false, and he conveyed it in such a way that had this big effect? Whereas obstruction is really like, did he interfere with the government process itself or the event itself? And so the obstruction, sometimes people think of obstruction in the context of like obstructing a criminal investigation where you don't cooperate with the police, which is like a whole other conversation. But the obstruction is really like kind of that interference with the process. And then the thing that I'm seeing a lot of confusion about from the public is they brought this like civil rights charge against Trump. And people are like, civil rights? Like, what do you mean? What is this old like 1800s civil rights law? What does that have to do with all of this? But essentially that civil rights law was brought to address basically like KKK actions and white supremacists and, vigilante type of, we're going to not concede power, or we're going to take over power, or we are going to start a riot, or whatever it might be. And so he's looking at, I think with the fraud related arguments in my mind, I'm already starting to hear from his attorney publicly that free speech, he is the defense of free speech. But with that, I will always say that our constitutional rights are not without restrictions, like just generally, like a lot of people say, well, I can say whatever I want. That's not exactly true under constitutional law precedent. So in this case, I don't know that outside of influencing his voters and his popularity with them, I don't know that it's going to help him that much in the courtroom, just because if what's in the indictment is true, that he was aware he had lost the election, and there were a lot of snitches in his camp, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which
yes, there was.
I've been waiting for, because we knew that throughout this process, you just have to know that a lot of people knew things that weren't coming to light until they were forced to come to light. So like Mike Pence taking notes so that he had his own documentation, which like always recommend doing that. Like you always want to have documentation to protect yourself. But he like took notes of these private conversations that were, with Trump and his team, where it was clear that everyone in the room knew, based on the statements they made, that he lost the election.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, it's the charges are not that surprising to me. But I'm seeing a lot of confusion over like the term civil rights being used related to one of them. And so it's just basically back in the day, in like the 1870s, the civil rights law in question was really kind of put in place, like I said, to address the KKK from preventing Black voters in being able to vote. And so they wanted to make sure that like everyone had the right to vote. And so essentially when we're looking at January 6th, they were interfering with the certifying of the election. And so that's like obstructing the process. They also knew that what they were saying, or it's alleged Trump knew what he was saying, was false. And so that's like the fraud kind of aspect of it. And then they were doing it to really restrict all of our voters' rights.
Yes.
Because the votes said one thing, but Trump and his team said something else.
And they were actively trying to delegitimize votes to change the outcome of the election. That is a conspiracy. And they don't name conspirators in the indictment, but I think we can guess who some of these people are. I think one of the first ones they talk about without naming is conspirator one. I think they were talking about Rudy Giuliani. That's my guess, but we know that because we saw him doing it with our own eyes.
Yes, with like his hairspray dripping down his face.
Oh my God, yes, that was not a good moment for him.
No, but I think you're right that it's probably Rudy Giuliani, and what fall from grace he had. I mean, like, I think of when I was in 8th grade and 9/11 happened. Exactly. He was like treated with so much respect, and he held himself so differently that if you watch videos of him back then versus now, totally different guy. Yes, or maybe he was just better at hiding who he was back then. I don't know. But yeah, I think thing with Rudy Giuliani is that he was acting as Trump's lawyer too. And so he's kind of tried in the past to get around cooperating with some of these investigations by saying like it's privileged, confidential conversations that he had with Trump. So he can't testify or be deposed on some of these things. I think he's probably going to continue to say that. However, lawyer ethics also say that you can't help a client commit a crime. Like you can't assist them in committing a crime. So it's going to be interesting to see where that goes.
He was disbarred, right? He lost his license to practice because he was essentially giving misleading information, false information. I mean, I feel like it's so straightforward to literally overturn the election and essentially steal it from Joe Biden. But whenever Donald Trump is accusing someone of something, it's usually what he's doing, is what I've come to learn about him.
Yeah, projecting, totally.
Yes, that's the word, projecting.
Yeah.
There's another one that says co-conspirator 2. Says it was an attorney who attempted to implement a strategy to leverage the vice president's role overseeing the certification proceeding on January 6, 2021, to obstruct the certification of the presidential election. I kind of have someone in mind of who that was. Wasn't that another one of his lawyers that represented him?
Yes. So in my mind, and what a lot of news networks are, throwing out there as who this is, they think it's John Eastman.
Mm-hmm.
But another attorney that was involved that we think is referenced in the indictment is Sidney Powell and Jeffrey Clark. I think Eastman is kind of seen as the one who developed the strategy that the others then ran with. And so his strategy was also, from what is reported, what put a lot of pressure on and also changed kind of the national conservative narrative on Mike Pence. It was really, you're the fall guy. If you don't do what we say, we're going to scapegoat you and say you're a traitor. And this is Trump's vice president at the time. Yeah. And I'm not a Mike Pence fan. I'm not a Pence girly. There are a lot of things with his politics that I don't agree with. But to his credit, he did what he was required to do on January 6th. And there was truly legally nothing in my mind and most lawyers' minds that he could have done differently to carry out what Eastman and what Trump wanted and what Giuliani wanted. I mean, he had a job to do. He did the job he was required to do. But it's interesting as like an attorney, we always listen to our clients and say, well, I wonder if we could make this legal argument. But it's totally different when then you take that possibility of a legal argument and you set it in motion. Right. And if you set it in motion, you have to stand behind it and be willing to face the consequences of that. Yes. And I think a lot of attorneys that have been in Trump's circle, like Eastman, Powell, the Mar-a-Lago documents attorney that got in trouble too. I think attorneys are realizing that we can no longer say, well, I just was throwing ideas out there. It wasn't my decision to run with it. That was the client's decision. And, we can be held accountable. And I think in these cases where they're trying to affect our democracy in such fundamental ways, they should be held accountable.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think is next? I heard the possibility of an arraignment, I think, for Thursday. Is that the next step?
Yeah. So the arraignment is going to be Thursday, August 3rd. And so tomorrow we're recording this on the 2nd. And it's probably going to be quick. At the arraignment, that's essentially where you say, I plead not guilty, or most people don't plead guilty in their arraignment. Right. But then the court kind of starts setting initial timelines of what comes next for the case. And the Department of Justice faced a lot of criticism over the last year from people saying, why aren't you moving faster on this investigation and bringing charges or getting it in front of a grand jury? And I think that because they took so much time, that hopefully this case at this stage will move quicker than it would have had they
Mhm.
tried to bring it many months ago. So we'll see.
Yeah, because Jack Smith said that he's wanting this to be a speedy trial, which tells me that they have enough evidence to make it a speedy trial. And so I think that the wait was worth it because we're going to get a more thorough trial.
I hope so. We'll see. It'll be
I
really
hope so too.
interesting. It'll be really interesting to follow. And I know you and I will be reporting on it as it unfolds. But Trump has a lot of legal issues, and his efforts to delay these trials until after the election have not been successful. Judges are saying, like, we are not going to keep delaying this, delaying this, delaying this. Now, do judges say that sometimes and then they do get delayed? Yes.
Right.
They will probably say, oh, there's discovery issues. We can't get access to this or that, or we're dealing with classified information and
Yes.
national security issues.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I think at this point, because so much time has passed and because the Department of Justice has hopefully done a really comprehensive job of compiling the evidence, and I'm really curious to see what witnesses, what people they might have turned from Trump's camp, because I think it's going to get juicy.
I think it's going to also. I'm like I'm kind of wondering, like, Jared Kushner, does maybe he's got something to do with it, because him and what's his daughter's name? Ivanka Trump,
Yeah.
right? They have been very distant from Trump lately. And I know that there was some speculation about Kushner perhaps having been someone that said things, that maybe he wasn't supposed to as Trump's son-in-law. And I'm interested to see it because I think he's one of those people that spoke up.
Right. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. I know that they interviewed him, they interviewed Ivanka,
Mm-hmm.
and Trump is, I think understandably, no one's surprised that he is using this new indictment to kind of like galvanize his base and
Mm-hmm.
say, like, this is a witch hunt. They're just trying to get after me because they know I'm going to win the next election. But to the prosecutor, the special prosecutor, Jack Smith's credit, everything I see of him, his interviews, the information he puts out, I think he does a really good job of using objective language and
Yes.
not polarizing language, saying this is what the evidence shows. And at the end of the day, in a courtroom with those jury members or those judges, I think there's much more chance of success for the Department of Justice than, on the public stage.
Right. And do you think he's ever going to see prison time? Because a lot of people think he deserves it, but don't see it happening because of his status.
Well, and that's interesting, right? Because they are also, and by they, I mean conservatives, are pointing to Hunter Biden right now, who we covered in our last episode.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying that the plea deal that he was offered is unfair because of his status. And yet we have a former president who is no stranger to the legal system. Long before he was president, he has faced a number of legal issues, alleged civil rights violations, certainly the defamation case that was very recent. Now,
Yep.
all of these indictments, sexual assault allegations from a few different people, payoffs. And so it's kind of remarkable if you look at the scope over his lifetime of how he's been able to stay out of jail or prison. But would it surprise me if he doesn't FaceTime? No, just because of his status. And
Right.
I also think that they're going to argue that there are some like additional security concerns that come with imprisoning a former president, and all of that. But we'll see. I certainly think that these charges could warrant prison time.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I would like to see some accountability, because if there is none, then it just sends the message that there is no equality here. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's next.
Yeah, and I'll just say lastly on that prison time question, I think I would be remiss if I did not point out that in my day-to-day, I come across a lot of clients and prospective clients who face prison or jail time for a lot minor charges
Right.
than what the president is facing, and who are treated much differently based on their race and their socioeconomic status and all of those things. So I would hope that when they are in court, they make sure that he is treated with the same respect and process that they treat his everyday voters.
Perfectly said. And I think that's all that we're hoping for. And I can't wait to see what's next and discuss it with you here on Unveiling Democracy. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all future episodes. Follow us on Instagram at Unveiling Democracy for exciting content, behind-the-scenes updates, and opportunities to connect with like-minded listeners. Your support and engagement means the world to us as we continue to unveil the true essence of democracy. Thank you for being a part of our journey, and see you next time.